Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Kelly Koffel. Together with Dr. Daniel Carter, we're going to teach the data journalism segment of the PH Digital program. We just came off a 1-hour short course that we just created to teach data journalism. That class was largely crafted around visualizing data. So we taught students where to go to look for data, some best practices, some tips for how to search for data files specifically, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then also how to interpret that data. We showed a couple of different tools that allowed for interpretation. Pivot tables in Excel. We showed a specific tool in class that's very popular in a lot of newsrooms. So we're going to illustrate some of that for you over the summer. Wanted to kind of give you an introduction. Let me ask a question. If you came onto something that looked like a trend with numbers, say a disease outbreak, what do you think you'd do as a journalist? Well, you'd do two things. You'd look for an expert to talk to, and then you'd go look for data and see if you could find some data to help tell that story. So with that in mind, do you think data journalism is new? Well, parts of it are new, and we're going to talk about that. And there are some big differences, literally, no pun intended, with big data. We'll get at that too. But data journalism isn't exactly new. In fact, in the late 1840s, 1849, some reporters at the New York Tribune thought they were perceiving what looked like an outbreak of cholera, and it was an increase, like that year was going to be worse than previous years. So they started asking around, and they found a prof, actually a math professor, William Gillespie at Union College in New York, and he kept a log year after year over a couple of decades of cholera patterns. Now again, he wasn't a disease specialist or a health professor. He actually was a math prof. He was interested in numbers. They went to him, and he confirmed that there was indeed an outbreak that year, and they ended up writing an article about it, and they visualized the data. They actually created a graph that they ran in the Union newspaper. So, I'm sorry, in the Tribune newspaper. That's not even the first example. There's actually an example from The Guardian in 1921. They did a story, including an illustration using data, on the cost of education for students in England in 1821. That's 118 years ago, 117 years ago. And they were already not only telling stories with data, but telling stories visualizing data with graphics in the newspaper. So data journalism isn't new. It's been around for a long, long time. But there are some really big differences now. And part of the reason is because of the amount of data. Another important reason is the accessibility of data. So here in Austin, we just got our housing appraisals for the year. Good or bad news, our appraisals went up. That means our taxes are going to go up. If I was going to sell my house this year, it'd be terrific news. I'm not, so I just have to pay more tax. That's an example of data, and that data is now available and has been for a decade on a website from the city of Austin or Travis County. You can actually do this all around the country. You can go to county websites and get all kinds of data, details about what houses cost, who bought them last, who lives there, addresses, details on taxes, details on improvements in houses. You can find out how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms people have, what square footage. It's pretty astounding, and that data has always been available. It's always been public record, but you used to have to go downtown to an office and request it. Now you don't have to do that anymore. You can just go to a county website and get it, search for it, and then bounce around. There's an illustration I used in this class where I looked at neighboring houses and compared them, and we saw who had the most expensive house in a certain neighborhood. All of that data is publicly available. We're going to concentrate for purposes of data journalism, not on that kind of individual, isolated level data, but on aggregate data. What we're interested in is telling stories with big chunks of data that show patterns, that show averages, that show changes over time. And so we'll talk about that. So think about this, and if you want, you can talk about this on the Slack feed this week. Does anybody have a terabyte hard drive? Terabyte's a lot of data. It's 1,000 gigabytes. I'll bet some of you have a terabyte hard drive. You may have even worked on or be working on a dissertation, and you're keeping data and drafts on a terabyte hard drive. That's a lot of data. But think about this. 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte. So a petabyte is 1,000,000 gigabytes of information. That is a lot of data. A petabyte, though, is just part of what we're going to talk about. A petabyte is 1/1000th exabyte. So an exabyte is 1,000 petabytes. It's 1,000,000,000 gigabytes. The reason I'm asking that is an exabyte is a ton of information. We generate, the web and our behavior, generate 2.5 exabytes of data every day. And the difference in data journalism now from 1821 or 1849 is twofold. One, we generate a ton more data ourselves using our mobile phones. So the way we move around, our geolocation apps, our interaction with social media generates data, tons of data, 2.5 exabytes of data every day. And that's one huge difference, tons more data, and a lot of it we generate. The second big difference, again, is that a lot of that data is available for free online for you to get your hands on and download. So what we're going to do in the data journalism section of the course is we're going to teach you this summer how to look for data and some real insider tips on how to search for data, data-specific files like comma-separated values, Excel spreadsheets, the kinds of things you might use for research, but you can also use to load in a program like Tableau, or that you can get APIs from and do some coding to work with the interface and build visualizations or data interactives with that data. So we'll show you how to find it. We'll show you how to visualize it, and we're going to teach you sort of best practices for teaching that. Another big change in this world of data, some of which we generate, is how we research data. So that's different in a couple of ways too. You can take established practices, established theories like a content analysis, and you can apply it to social media. So you can take existing tools, existing methods, existing theories, and apply them in new areas, like we're generating data with Twitter, with Facebook. I did a study some years ago with Twitter. We found that the 3 key ways journalists use Twitter is to link to their existing stories, to have a conversation with the audience, and to look for people to participate in stories. And that still holds now. So research is driven in a different way by this data. The other thing is you can get access to data. Dr. Carter, for example, has a tool that's sort of constantly scraping data from some social media tools, and he has access to this data set that he can go visit and actually do research, conduct aggregate research on it. So those are a couple of other key differences in the era of data and data journalism. So that's what we'll talk about. Take a look at the assignment that's here. There are a couple of readings. We want to just get you thinking about data and this access to it. One of the tensions is the difference between fabulous service you get from things like Amazon and Google tracking your behavior and offering suggestions, and whether it's a creepy violation of your privacy. I love it. I think it's good service. My wife can't stand it. She thinks it's creepy. So think about that, and that's one of the key questions we asked that we want you to discuss on Slack this week, is this sort of tension between service aspect of us providing data and then the ethical part of, is that appropriate? So those are the things to think about. Again, look at the assignment, read some of the things at the link, not all of it, one's a whole book. I have some specific parameters around it. And then jump on Slack, and we'll join you in the conversation the week of April 9th. And then we look forward to seeing you on campus in May.